Hey everyone, my name is Olaf, and in this tutorial I will show you how to make a render like this one in Blender. You will get the tank model for free, and then I will show you how to rig it, animate it, and how to animate a lot of tanks at the same time. As always, it's going to be quick and easy, so let's get started. This video was sponsored by Concierge by CoreWeave, which is an extremely fast, easy, and affordable render farm. There's no queue, there's over 45,000 GPUs available, and it supports both Eevee and Cycles. Sign up now to get $5 in credit for free. Okay, so before we begin, make sure to download the free tank model that I made in the link in the description. And then we can start off by selecting the tank hull, and then go to Object, Snap, and then Cursor to Selected. And then we can add the empty, so go to Add, then Empty, and add an empty cube. And then press S to scale. And then press S, then X to scale it on the X-axis, S, then Y to scale it on the Y-axis, and then S, then Z to scale it on the Z-axis, and G, then Z to move the empty on the Z-axis. The shape and the size of the empty does not really matter. So let's select the curves for the tracks. So hold in Shift to select both of them. And then select the road wheels and the tank hull as well. And then select the empty. And then press Ctrl P to set the object's parent to the empty. Okay. And then we can select the empty, and then press G, then Y to grab it on the Y-axis. And as you can see, the tracks work. Now the next step of the tutorial is to add an empty sphere to control the turret and the barrel of the tank. So let's go to Object, and then set Origin, and Origin to Geometry. And then go to Object once again, and then go to Snap, and let's set the cursor to the selected object. And then we can add the empty. So let's go to Empty, and add an empty sphere. Okay, and then press S to scale. And then we can press G, and then Y to grab it on the Y-axis. And let's go to the top view, so numpad 7 to go to the top view, and make sure that the sphere is placed right in the middle of the cylinder inside the turret. And then select the barrel, and then the turret, hold in Shift, and then press Ctrl P to set the barrel parent to the turret. And then select the turret, and then select the empty, and then press Ctrl P to set it parent to the empty, and then select the sphere empty, and select the main empty, and then press Ctrl P to set the empty sphere parent to the empty main. And then we can select the main empty, and press G, and then Y to grab it on the Y-axis. And we can also select the empty sphere, and then press R, then Z to rotate the turret on the Z-axis. Like this. And we can also animate the barrel of the gun. So let's go to the side view, numpad 3, and then select the barrel. And then we need to add some shape keys to animate the shape of the barrel. So click on the plus sign 2 times, and then go into edit mode, and then press Alt A to deselect everything. And then let's go into wireframe view, and then press B to box select, and then press G, then Y to grab them on the Y-axis. And then let's go back to object mode, and then we can increase the value. And as you can see, we have the animation, and you can keyframe that later to create a shooting animation. Okay, so let's save before we continue. So save as. I'm just going to call the file rig, and you can save it wherever you want on the computer. And you can also download the rig file in the link below. Okay, so let's go into the device, and I'm going to use the CPU because using the GPU usually messes up the recording. And as you can see, we already have a blue material for the tank. And the next step of the tutorial will be to duplicate the tank and add different types of materials, as well as showing you how you can control many tanks at the same time. Okay, so let's duplicate the tank. So go into wireframe view and press B to box select and select the whole tank. Then press Shift D to duplicate, then Y to move the duplication on the Y-axis. Okay, and then let's go back to solid view. Then press Alt A to deselect everything. And then let's select the road wheels and go into the materials. Let's copy the material and create a new one. So let's call it red. And then let's add the color red. And then let's go into rendered view to see what it looks like. And it looks okay. So let's add the same material to the rest of the tank as well. So let's add it to the turret, to the hull, and to the barrel. And then we're going to create a new material for the tracks. And then let's select the left track. And copy the old material. And call it red tracks. And let's change the color as well. So something like this. And then we need to copy the same material to the second track as well. So add the red tracks material. And then the next step of the tutorial is to add an empty and control the tanks with that empty. So we're going to duplicate this exact tank many times. So let's select the hull, then go to Object, Snap, and then Cursor to Selected, and then go to Add, Empty, and add an empty cube. And then press G, then Set to grab the empty cube on the Z-axis. And we're going to use this cube to control the rest of the tanks in that line. So press S to scale, and then select the empty of the tank, and then the empty, and then press Ctrl P to set the main empty parent to the control empty. Okay, and then let's go into wireframe, and then press B to box select. And then press numpad 7 for top view. And then press Shift D to duplicate, then X to move the duplication on the X-axis. And then press Shift R to repeat the previous actions. And since the first tank was set parent to the control empty, the rest of the tanks will be set parent to the control empty as well. So that when we move the control empty, all of these tanks will move. So let's go into solid view and then press G, then Y to grab it on the Y-axis. And as you can see, we control all of them at the same time. Okay, so let's go into rendered view. As you can see, all of them has the same color. And for the second line, we only need to copy one of the tanks. And then we can duplicate it later when we have added a new material. Okay, so let's go back to solid view. And then we can save before we continue. So let's go to File, then Save As, and then give it a new name, and then press Enter to save. And then we need to select the control empty and the first tank. So B to box select, and then press numpad 3 for side view, and then press Shift D to duplicate, then Y to move the duplication on the Y-axis. And then press Shift R to repeat the previous actions. And we're going to have 3 different colors for these tanks. So let's go into rendered view, and then press Alt A to deselect everything. And then let's select the whole of the first duplication and go into the materials, and let's select the blue material and add the blue material to the rest of the tank. So the second row of tanks will be blue. And let's add it to the barrel as well. And then we need to add the blue tracks material to the tracks. Okay, and then we need to duplicate the tank on the x-axis. So let's go into wireframe view, and then press B to box select and select the tank, and then press numpad 7 to go to the top view, and then we're going to duplicate the tank. So press Shift D, then X, and let's make sure it's around the same place as the first line of tanks, and then press Shift R to repeat the previous actions. Okay, and I'm adding a lot of them, as you can see. And we can control all of these tanks with the control empty once again. So press G, then Y, and as you can see, we move them all at the same time. Okay, so now we have the second line, and now we're going to edit the third line. So let's go back to solid view, and then let's take a closer look at the third line. And go into rendered view, and let's select the turret, and then we can copy the old material so that we can create a new one, and this one is going to be light blue. So let's experiment with the different shades of blue. So something like this, and then let's copy the same material to the rest of the tank. And let's edit the color slightly, and I think that looks nice. So let's add a name to the material. So let's call it light blue, and then let's select the tracks and create a new track material as well. And let's make it slightly blue, and I think that looks nice. Okay, so now we have the third tank, and now we can duplicate the tank on the x-axis. So let's go to wireframe view, and then press B to box select, and then press numpad 7 for top view, and then press Shift D, then X to move the duplication on the x-axis. and then make sure it's in the same position on the x-axis as the second row. And then press Shift R to repeat the previous actions. Okay, so now we have 3 lines of tanks. So let's go into rendered view and see what it looks like. And I think it looks nice. So now we can make even more of them. So let's turn on the overlay and then go into wireframe view and then press B to box select and then press numpad 3 for side view. And then we're going to duplicate them on the y-axis. So press Shift D, then Y to duplicate them on the y-axis. And then press Shift R to repeat the previous actions. And now we can make even more of them. So Shift R, and Shift R, and Shift R. Now let's hide the overlay and go into rendered view and see what it looks like. And I think it looks great. So let's go back to solid view and start animating these models. So let's enable the overlay again. And then press Shift A to deselect everything. And I will show you how we can animate the tank. So press N after selecting the empty. And then press I to keyframe the location of the empty. And then let's go a few frames forward. And then press G, then Y to grab the empty on the y-axis. As you can see, it's quite laggy because we have so many tanks. And then press I to keyframe the new location. And then we can keyframe the animation of the turret as well. So let's select the sphere empty. And then press I to keyframe the rotation. And then let's go a few frames forward. And then press R, then Z to rotate the turret and the barrel on the z-axis. And then press I to keyframe the new rotation. Okay, so now we have the basic tank animation. And now we can animate the barrel as well using the shape keys that we added earlier in the tutorial. So let's go into the shape keys settings. And then we can animate the value. So press I to keyframe the value. And then let's go a few frames forward and set the value to 1. And then press I to keyframe the new value. And then let's go a few frames forward once again and set the value back to 0 and press I to keyframe. And as you can see, we have the shooting animation. And we can control these lines of tanks both individually or in groups. And we can even add an extra empty to control all of these tanks. So press Shift A and add a cube empty. And then press G to grab. And then press S to scale. And then select each of the control cubes. And then hold in Shift to select multiple empties. And then I'm going to select all of them. And then select the top empty. And press Ctrl P to set them parent to that empty. And if we press G, then Y, we will move all of these tanks on the y-axis. Now, before we continue, let's save the progress. So go to File, Save As, click on the plus sign, and then Save. And after I added some keyframes to the tanks, I had this very basic animation, and you can make something similar using the tips that I gave in this tutorial. So let's just move through the timeline. And as you can see, we have the animation that you saw in the beginning of the tutorial. Okay, so now I have the file, so now I'm going to render it in Concierge, which is the sponsor. So let's select the Blender file and then open. And then it uploads. And then let's launch the render. And here we have a lot of options. I'm going to use Blender 2.81 and then render it as an animation from frame 1 to 700. And let's set the number of samples to 200. And this is going to be very quick because we're rendering many frames at the same time using a lot of GPUs, up to 540 at the same time. And once the rendering is done, you can download it as a zip file and then unzip it and get all of the rendered images. And that's it for this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll post more animation tutorials very soon. So thank you guys for watching and subscribe.